This is the Sports Psychology Podcast with Michael Seeley for July 11th, Monday, Tour de France Rest Day. A good time to assess the overall tour. And today I'm getting some perspectives from an old friend of mine, Bob Mionske, who is a two-time Olympic cyclist. Got fourth place in the Olympic road race in 1988, over 100 career victories, a real fighter, a real smart guy. Taught me a lot about psychology and bike racing. So without further ado, we're going to dive into my interview and perspectives with Bob Mionske on comparing modern day bike racing to the golden age of cycling, which I like to call it, back in the 80s and 90s. And we have some interesting perspectives. Enjoy. So Bob Mionske, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Michael. Glad we're getting a chance to talk today.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk with you because you have so much experience racing. And, we raced together, I say back in the day in the 80s and 90s. I wanted to get your insights into a couple things today. I want to compare racing from the 80s and 90s to today, just in general, in the context of the Tour de France and modern day bike racing. Well, first of all, Bob, I wanted to ask you, just in general, something that's I've been talking about in my podcast and I've been pretty transparent about is like the difference between racing back in the good old days, right? So everyone has their own good old days, and I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon here, but comparing a couple of things, some of the courses, I would say on stage 5, which had the cobblestones, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not sure if that really has a place in a stage race just because of the danger and how the GC can be shaken up. And I think the tour organizers have opted on the side of spectacular kind of courses, more for TV and the spectacle, and really discounting the racer's safety. So I wanted to maybe dive into that, particularly stage 5, having the cobblestones, going from big wide road to narrow cobbles, and wondering if you think, and just be honest, do you think that has a place in the Tour de France? Do you think that's appropriate?
It's a tough call. I mean, I never rode the Tour de France, so I can't imagine, I don't know exactly how they're looking at it, but I suppose anything that could cause the favorites to have some kind of a mishap allows for others to have an opportunity. So it makes it for a more exciting race. And, given that we have such handful of dominant riders, maybe that's part of their calculus as well. I mean, it mostly turned out okay in retrospect. What did you think about?
Well, except for Primož Roglič, he crashed. There's an incident in the stage 5 where a motorcycle sort of dislocated a hay bale in the middle of a corner, and Roglič hit it and dislocated his shoulder. So there was, some other commentators were criticizing. I think Sean Kelly was talking about the amount of motorbikes they have in the tour these days is, double than it was way back in the 80s and 90s. So, yeah, I mean, my opinion is that I don't think it has a place in the Tour de France. I think that if you want to race Paris-Roubaix, then you just race that race, and there's too many variables in there. There's also stage 2 that went over that really, really long bridge. Is famous for having really bad crosswinds. And people were saying that stage was selected just for the drama of the crosswinds and the echeloning and crashes and stuff like that. So obviously you can tell what my opinion is here. I think some of the courses need to be redesigned, but what do you think?
Well, here, a couple of things that pop into mind. One is the bale of hay that popped out or whatever. That wasn't really because of the cobbles necessarily. They probably have that in a lot of places. Rolling through the town, so I don't know if we can put that onto the cobble course.
Right.
But thinking back to the Tour de France the last 10 years as a viewer, it seemed like someone would get a stranglehold, and then there would be a lot of neutral racing, and that's gone out the window.
Right.
I think to the betterment of the sport and to the spectator. And in addition, they're airing these races from the gun, so that's a new change. Yep. And, it's keeping it really exciting. And it also, you end up with somebody that seems to be the main dominator without much of a challenge sometimes in the last few years. And now with these different courses, that's kind of Okay, let me put it another way. It's been offered that Pogačar could end up with all three jerseys, and technically four. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
he would be having, if he wins a leader's jersey as the best young rider, he could get the points jersey just because of the way the point competition is laid out on the course,
Right. Right.
and then the King of the Mountains just comes along with winning stage top finishes. So
Hmm. Hmm.
Robbie McEwen, which is a former sprinter, said, and a commentator on the race in Europe, says that that doesn't speak well to the design of the course. So I'm pushing
Hmm.
back a little bit. I like
Yeah.
the idea that bigger riders that can handle the danger
Right.
and the different conditions are in the sport too. Otherwise, we
Right.
just get the sport has become much more climby. I
Hmm.
saw a graphic. I saw some information that the climbers are getting taller and skinnier.
Hmm.
And you're talking about kind of in the 1980s. I pull up some old video once in a while, uh, and everyone rode these massive gears, and they
Yep.
had completely different positions. So it kind
Yep.
of favored a different body type.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I get your point for sure, is to keep the race more interesting, to make it so that there's not one dominant rider all the time. I just think that, especially, I think my biggest criticism was stage 5 of the cobbles. And you're right, like the hay bale could be anywhere, but it was just the idea of going in and out of these narrow sections. And one thing I also want to ask you about is race radios. What's your opinion on race radios? Keep them or get rid of them?
I like that they get rid of them for some races. It completely
Yeah.
changes races. When you
Yeah.
and I were racing, you'd have to ask around, is there a break and how
Right.
much time do they have? Now you got a guy in a car with a computer. Literally, he can,
Right.
dial in the gap,
Yep.
the power that's being put out, and spit out a number, and he can tell his robots how fast to ride for the next 4 hours, and we can all watch it on TV. A good example is, think about you're riding with your buddies, or you're in a race and you're going as hard as you can, and one of your competitors just flies out of the field.
Yep.
Before we could look at power meters, we would think, wow, I maybe need to make a move and try to catch up with that person. Now you can look at your power meter and say, well, there isn't a human around that can hold that gap, so I'll just sit back here and bide my time. And that makes for negative, kind of less exciting racing. So.
Yeah. 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 I'm of the mind that the race radio should be just got rid of completely. I think they've tried that in a couple of tours, like they had stage experiments where they tried no race radios, and everyone freaked out. They're just so like addicted to them and used to them. But yeah, in my opinion, I think they should get rid of them, make racing much more of like a chess game again, and put some X factors in there.
Have you noticed? Occasionally it's become a matter of controversy whether or not the rider in front, there's some drama going on, and they'll say, they'll either rip their earpiece out on screen,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll just say it wasn't working, and then they'll pick up tactics or do something, or fail to do something that was contravened what the director was telling them to do.
I have seen that. Yeah. I think it must be annoying if you have your race director in the back telling you to do stuff, and you're not, director's not there. You're probably just like, look, let me like trust my own brain here. Like, I'm a smart guy. Like, I made it to this level. Like, you don't have to be telling me, barking orders at me the whole time. And to that point too, I think that, I was talking to another friend of mine about sort of the correlation between race radios and increase in crashes in the tour. So the pre-race radios, I think they came in 95 with the Motorola team debuted them in the tour, I think. And just what's your opinion? You think that it's safer without the radios in your ear?
Well, I don't have any personal experience with it. I
Yeah.
guess they can alert them to the hazards on the road, but
Right.
the problem, if you spend any time thinking about it, is everybody's getting the same information. So
Right.
it reminds me of a story. One of the storied American coaches was named Eddie B. He was a Polish guy that came here and ran our program for a long time, and was on the national team, development team, or whatever it was called. And there was like maybe 30 or 40 of us. And we had done a really hard race with lots of pros and European teams. And it was a crosswind, and the guys hadn't done very well. I think I did about the best, or maybe two guys did better than me, and we didn't do great.
Mm-hmm.
And he was yelling at us. So he's addressing 40 people, and he said, all of you should have been in the top 10.
Uh-huh.
So they have a different math system over there. But, you know, if that guy would have been on the radio, he would have been yelling at all of us at the same time.
Right.
No, I like the individual. But having said that, this last couple years of bike racing have been incredibly exciting, and it makes you wonder, you know, like watching Wout van Aert dominate, just what it's like for the others to be racing with a guy like that. I've heard it said that he's making them look like junior racers. And when you consider the aerodynamics and how much faster they ride now, and the way he's riding away from everybody, it's like, I don't know, it's like Eddie Merckx, could he have done that? It's just insane.
It is pretty crazy how Wout van Aert is so dominant and just has so much power, and just that really aggressive style of racing, of, you know, being in, I think one stage he was in like every single breakaway from the gun because he wanted to be in a breakaway. He's like, I'm just going to be in every one. Just that dominant style of racing, and even him compared to Pogačar. Pogačar is obviously the GC man, but Wout van Aert is that style of racing, and his build, and the aerodynamics of the bike. He's just, I mean, there's that one stage where he got away in that climb and soloed 10 kilometers into the finish alone. Remember that one?
Yeah.
That was phenomenal. I'm watching that. I was like, here's a guy who's basically holding off the peloton. I mean, obviously Jumbo-Visma was blocking and breaking things up, but to ride 10 kilometers in solo against all those pros, I mean, that guy's phenomenal. When I watched that, it's like he's just incredibly strong.
Yeah, there's a handful of them, and Pogačar, you know, I put him right up at the same level, maybe not toe to toe, but psychologically they know that if they make it hurt and they really push themselves, that they're pretty much the only one that's going to be out off the front. And that's really tough for the other riders to see that. That's a tough place to be, because you're giving it your all and you see that your competitor is just one better than you. So then what do you do at that point? And they're starting to gang up on these guys, that's going to make the tour more exciting moving forward. And by that, I mean, Ineos team will attack, and then maybe the Trek team won't help chase, and then the next day the Trek guys will take off, or whoever's in second and third, and they'll keep putting the pressure on Pogačar and his team to, pull those guys in. And eventually they can isolate Pogačar. And once they do that, as well as I do, when you're out on the flats and you're outmanned, that's a really tough spot to be.
Yeah. What do you think about there's been some people saying that Jonas Vingegaard can actually win the Tour this year, based on his performance in some of the mountain stages, hilly stages so far. He's got the stronger team, Jumbo-Visma, compared to Pogačar's Emirates team. Do you think it's possible that Vingegaard could win this year? Or do you think it's kind of foregone conclusion that Pogačar is going to win?
I don't know. I can't say. I don't think that, how it is if you're competing and you reach beyond your limit, well, I guess that's a contradiction of terms, but you make a really, really great effort and you do something spectacular. Everyone expects you to be able to do that from now on.
Right.
And it's a lot different to, be there day in and day out than it is to shoot from below and try to jump up. And that's essentially what he's done in the Tour last year. And so, but the other thing that we have to remember is there's a reason they make this 3-week-long race.
Yeah.
Sean Kelly, King Kelly, as they call him, could win. He won Paris-Nice 7 times.
Oh, that's true. That's right.
Yeah, but he couldn't win a 3-week. He would go a couple of days into the 3rd week, and then the body would give out. And if you don't know what that feels like as a rider, go ride 100 miles and really push yourself, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then consider doing that 7-10 more days. And the body gives out, but does the mind? And so that's what we're going to enter into the 3rd week, and that's a great point. So that it is the hardest stage race in the world, going on for 3 weeks. And so a lot could happen tactically, a lot could happen. There could be
a crash where someone gets caught behind that. There could be just, some echelons or side winds or a flat tire. There's all these things that could happen. But like all of that aside, if everything goes smoothly for all the top favorites, Pogacar, I think, looks like the guy. He's physically tough, mentally tough. He's got a really good attitude. I think Vingegaard also. He's 135 pounds, so he can climb really well. But yeah, to your point, it's that fatigue of the stage race, day after day after day after day, and Pogacar has proven already a couple times that he doesn't crack. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a good tour. Well, great, Bob. We're going to wrap things up for today, but I wanted to get your insights into some of these things here, and I think again it's going to be a great tour. And thanks everyone for tuning in today.